Richard? Off you go.
Okay, this snowdrop here was found in the local churchyard. It's a plicatus snowdrop. It just seemed different to me when I saw it, and I brought one bulb home and I've propagated all this amount from that, and we've named it after our local vicar, who is Sue Giles, and so it's called Anglesey Sue. Anglesey because Anglesey is the benefice that the 5 parishes around here have called themselves.
Right.
This small clump here is Claire Blakeway Phillips. Now her father was the Reverend Blakeway Phillips, and he was the vicar of Orwell and a great galanthophile who collected snowdrops and other small bulbs, and this one is named after his daughter Claire. It's a very interesting snowdrop with quite nice markings. Godfy Owen, the snowdrop here, is a new one to me. I've had it 2 or 3 years, and it's a really good doer. It's doubled itself over and over again as quick as anything. It's a form of Eloise, and it has 6 petals, which is very unusual for a single snowdrop. I can say, I think. Sorry.
Right.
The snowdrop here is really quite absurd if you look at it. It doesn't look like a snowdrop at all. It just looks like a bunch of small bits of petals. It's called fluff, and that's exactly what it looks like a bit of fluff. It's just fun. A snowdrop should be fun, actually, and this is a fun one.
Right. Richard, where is the origin of snowdrops? Are they British or somewhere abroad?
I would guess 90% of the population think they're British, because we have them everywhere, but they're not. They're indigenous to Greece, Turkey, the Caucasus, Russia, but certainly not Britain. That they were brought in. Most of the snowdrops we see now were brought in by the soldiers during the Crimea War and after the Crimea War. I'm sure monks brought them perhaps earlier, but that they do so well with us that you would think that they should belong here, but they don't really.
Why is it that there seem to be so many varieties of snowdrop here in Lode?
It's partly due to the Reverend Hailstone, who owned Anglesey Abbey in 1850, and I am convinced that either he or his brother, who lived there with them, and he was a botanist, so it probably was him, who collected snowdrops. They went on the grand tours and brought all sorts of things back, and snowdrops would have been an easy thing to bring back. Snowdrops, I have to say that I'm partly to blame for the increase in snowdrops at Anglesey, because we discovered one which was named by Graham Thomas as Lacedaemonius, which is a Russian snowdrop, and he let it be known to all the galanthophiles that I had this snowdrop at Anglesey, and so they all descended on me asking for a small piece of it. which I was very willing to give them because we had thousands of these snowdrops growing in a dell, which I didn't tell them about that, and they brought all their treasures to give to me, and that's where the snowdrop started at Anglesey, with all these wonderful gifts that we had. The sad thing is that when they were able to do DNA on snowdrops, they found that this Lacedaceanus was not Lacedaceanus at all, but it was actually a hybrid of Nivalis and Warrenoffii, and so we've called it Anglesey Abbey. So we have a snowdrop called Anglesey Abbey, which lots of people think looks exactly like Lacedaceanus, but it isn't.
We'll have a look at that one later. And then how did they get from there to around here in Load, around the church and rectory and so on?
Churches are, if you think, wherever you go in the country, it's pretty common to see snowdrops growing in churchyards, and I think it's because people bring them, put them on graves. That snowdrops, by the very nature of them, are very promiscuous. So you put 2 or 3 snowdrops together and you get all sorts of little babies, and the birds move them, and I think that's how snowdrops came into churchyards, and people move them around, and the more you move them, the more you have.
Great.
Is that okay?
So how long have all these snowdrops been here, Richard?
Well, this is my second go at snowdrops. I had a collection which must have been well over 100, and I desperately wanted to turn my garden into a herbaceous borders, which I'm very fond of herbaceous borders. So I dug all my snowdrops up, labelled them, and moved them all to Kirtland Tower, where Lord Fairhaven lives. And I gave them all to him, and they're on a bank there, and they look absolutely marvellous, or they did last year. I'm going over to see them tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to very much. So the snowdrops here, I had to do away with the herbaceous border plants after about 10 years of having them, because I'm 87 now, and I don't, herbaceous is hard work, and I wanted to put shrubs in, so I started to introduce snowdrops. So about 5 years ago I started to introduce snowdrops here, and just by splitting them up and moving them around, I've got what I think is a pretty good garden of snowdrops.
You have indeed.
Nearly all snowdrops have a mark inside the leaves on the sinus, and this one of Anglesey Abbey is what is called formis. Can I pick one and show you?
Yep.
It's easy to show you, and you reach across. This has no green markings at all. It's a pure white snowdrop. Whether you can see that.
Yep, indeed.
I
Unusual for its absence.
Yeah.
Yep. Richard, is that many of the ones you've talked about seem to have varied from original snowdrops, and that the book of Encyclopedia of Snowdrops only 20 years ago or so had not so many, and now there are so many more. Why is that?
Because people are naming everything that they see that is slightly different. They're wanting to put a name to it, which I think somehow that it just seems to me to be wrong. You'll see in my garden lots of the snowdrops are not named purposely, because I don't want to actually keep thinking of names. I much prefer to see the snowdrops.
Yep.
I hope that is that.
Yep, but they do seem to change very quickly. I mean,
they do, yes.
Mutate. I mean,
yes, they do mutate. Yes, that they.
How does that happen? Do they cross-pollinate or what?
Yeah, they're very promiscuous. Which, I mean, the various. I mean, you look at just where we're standing now. The amount of varieties there are just here. If they're allowed to seed, we're going to get all sorts of seedlings, and every seedling will be slightly different, and some will be good enough so that people think they ought to be named.
I see. Right. This is
Trumps. It's a new snowdrop for me. It was given to me last year very kindly by the gardeners of Anglesey Abbey. And it's got beautiful markings on the outside, and it's a fine snowdrop. Wish that all Trumps were as good as that.
indeed.
Okay. The snowdrop here is the snowdrop that's named after me. When we first started collecting snowdrops at Anglesey and deciding what snowdrops we had in this fish pond area, a man called Richard Nutt, who had the most wonderful name because he was a nutcase, he really was, but he was brilliant at bulbs. He would crawl about on hands and knees in all the snow and the frost to look at snowdrops, and he'd get soaked to the skin. But anyhow, he found this snowdrop growing in the dell. There were 4 bulbs of it, and he had 2 and I had 2, and so all Anglesey's collection of Richard Ayres all came from the 2 bulbs, and the trust very kindly named the snowdrop after me, which was brilliant. Soon after we found the snowdrop, or discovered the snowdrop that's named after me, we found another snowdrop, much smaller, but absolutely unique inside. The petals and the inner parts of the snowdrop are absolutely fine, and we named that after the present Lord Fairhaven. So it's Lantis Elwin. Oh, low star. In one of the dells very close to the Abbey, where part of the garden where we think probably Housestone would have gardened, we found this enormous Eloise growing, and after much discussion we decided to call it Lodestar, really after the parish magazine that comes round every month.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Lode, opposite the church, in the thatched house there.
In what year?
1936.
So you say you're 87 now?
86, I'm 87 next month.
Congratulations. And you've lived in Lode since then?
I have, all my life, yeah.
And your father was a gardener?
He was a gardener. He became the head gardener at Anglesey. He was a gardener at Anglesey before the Fairhavens bought it. So he always laughed and said that the Fairhavens bought me with the Abbey, which in some ways they did.
So what year did he retire?
He retired in 73.
Right, and then you took over?
I took over as head gardener,
yep.
And I was head gardener for 27 years. I retired in 2000.
And what about your mother? What did she do?
My mother worked at Anglesey before she was married. She was a housemaid. She did work for the first Lord Fairhaven, first Lady Fairhaven, in London. I think they had a big house in Eaton Square, and I have a feeling that one of her jobs was to do flowers. She used to have to go to Covent Garden very early in the morning to buy great bunches of flowers to put into the rooms. Apparently, I've heard my mother say that Lady Fairhaven didn't like the same flowers in one room more than one day, so they all had to be changed.
A lot of work.
They were the days of lots of money, I guess.
So you went to school in Lode?
I went to school in Lode and Bottisham College.
Was the school where was it?
I went to Broughton Hall.
Oh.
Yes, it just opened as a school then, so I was one of the first pupils there.
And our daughter was one of the last.
Right, yes. Oh, right. Yeah.
So when you left school,
yes,
what did you do?
I joined the Royal Navy. I'd been a wartime baby, if you like, and my father was always very hard working, and he had 2 allotments. He kept bees, he had chickens, he even had pigs. And so we had a busy growing up life. We were very self-sufficient. We never went hungry for anything. We had loads of food and everything, which was wonderful. But by the time I was 16 and left school, I was fed up with gardening, or I thought I was. Yeah. And so I picked an occupation that didn't have any gardens. So I went into the Navy, and I was there for a year. Then I had to have a medical, and they found that my eyes were not sufficiently good to be a seaman. So they suggested I could either leave the Navy or be a cook. And I decided to leave. I didn't want to be a cook stuck in the bottom of a ship, not seeing anything.
Yeah.
So I became a cook. And I went to work on a fen farm, Shrubses, in the village of Lode.
Oh, yes.
And continuously, my father was pestered by the First Lord Fairhaven to say, why doesn't Richard come and work with us? And I was driving a tractor up and down these lovely long rows of carrots, which was great fun and not very hard work. And I quite enjoyed it. And in the end, he wrote me a letter, Lord Fairhaven did, and invited me, which was really like a demand, to come and see him one evening at 6:30. So I got dressed up and clean shoes and everything, and down I went. And first question was, how much do they pay you on the farm? Mm-hmm. And I said, £3 and 10 shillings. That was a week. Yeah. And he said, I'll give you £5. And he bought me. So my father was bought, and so was I, really.
What year was that?
That was, I'm going to
say... In the 50s?
Yeah, early 50s, 51, 52 perhaps.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that would be sad if I was bought for money, but by the time I'd been there 3 or 4 days, I'd absolutely loved gardening, and I've loved it ever since. Even at my great age now, it's my greatest love in life is being in the garden, seeing things grow, having success with something like snowdrops. You take a snowdrop and it doesn't look very good, and you look after it for 2 or 3 years and it suddenly becomes a really lovely plant. There's something in that, you know, and that and music, I mean, are wonderful for me. I really enjoy it.
Yes, music, of course, is another love, isn't it?
It is another love, yeah. It's getting harder as you get older.
You play the organ.
I play the organ at Lode and Bodisham at the moment, but it's becoming hard because the hands are getting arthritis, and that's not helped by doing gardening. So, I mean, my decision would be that I would much rather garden than play, because I can enjoy music listening to it, but it's a shame when you can't play the things that you think you ought to be able to. So that's becoming hard.
What music is your favourite?
Bach. I'm a Bach fan.
Yeah,
he writes such difficult music that I can play it on my little organ at home, but I daren't play it in church. I can make a bit of a noise with it.
So, what would your tips be for someone who wants to be a really good gardener? What are the qualities you think you need?
Patience. Patience is the most important one for gardening, because nothing happens instant. Anybody who says I can do an instant garden is totally wrong. It might look instant, but it then needs an awful lot of work to it. But patience, a love of plants, a love of being outside, not to be worried if you get little rain on you, you know, and enjoy the environment, but not expect to be paid a huge amount of money. Gardeners are not terribly well paid, but there are advantages to being a gardener, you know, and I think I've done fairly well.
You have done amazingly, and in fact the local magazine, the Lode Star, this month I notice has got a feature on you.
A little bit, yes.
With a lot of the prizes and rewards and awards you've got. Can you tell us about one or two of those?
Well, they only put in about the snowdrop. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be given the MBE for gardening. I was the first working gardener in the United Kingdom to get the MBE for gardening.
Wonderful.
Then the RHS, which is the Royal Horticultural Society, they gave me the second highest honour, which is an Associate of Honour, which are only 100 people in the world have that honour at any one time. So the gardeners at Anglesey said, well, they're expecting you to die any minute so they can give it to somebody else. And then round the corner, you may have seen a peacock, a little peacock. That was given to me because I was nominated as Gardener of the Year by Country Life.
Wow.
That was in the year 2000, the year I retired. So that was rather nice. I had a very nice reception. Went up to Chelsea Hospital. I had no idea that Chelsea Hospital, I've been to the grounds, but the actual hospital is enormous.
It is.
Yes,
it's vast.
wonderful place. And they've got this wonderful chapel there, and we had this in this great reception. Then we had a very, very posh meal. It was lovely. I enjoyed that.
This is a wonderful garden, but if you had to choose your favourite other garden than this, what one would you choose, or a couple?
Hidcote, I think, is a fine garden. It's superb. Sissinghurst.
These 18th century gardens, do you like?
No, these are both. Yeah, these are both 19th
Yes.
century gardens, really. Hidcote was Lawrence. I can't think of his Christian name. He produced that roughly at the same time as Vita Sackville West was doing Sissinghurst. You know, my only worry with these is that the trust have these wonderful gardens, and and the same applies with Anglesey. They're hell bent on making money, and there doesn't seem to be any thought for the future of the garden. It's almost as though today is the only thing that matters. When I was there, which is 25 years ago nearly now, I mean, was the people who are my boss always used to say, we must look to the future. We must make sure that the garden is as good as it is now 50 years time, you know. So the planting has to be right. They don't seem to be able to do that now. It's everything instant. I think it's a shame.
Yes, it is. You don't mind the world hearing you say that?
I don't mind. No, I don't mind. No.
Good.
No.
So, one last question. I came to Lode nearly 40 years ago, and we've been neighbours since then, which has been wonderful. But you've been here much longer than me. Can you single out a few of the things that you think have changed most in the time that you've been in Lode?
Oh dear.
I mean, obviously it's bigger.
It's bigger, yes.
And
not grown like some villages, but there's so many people. When I was growing up, everybody seemed to work in the village. The farming community was much bigger. I mean, farms now seem to manage, a massive farm seem to manage with one person with lots of great big machinery, whereas they would have lots of farm workers. So there was more camaraderie in the village, I think. I think more sport was played on the recreation ground when I was growing up than there is now.
Yeah.
Churches are empty.
Yeah.
But that's a sign of the times, I think, you know.
Yeah.
Television. I mean, we were talking about it the other day in the church. When I was a teenager, the church this time of the year would be absolutely wonderfully hot because we had a big stove in the aisle, you know, that was coke fired, and now we have electric heating up there. The heat, it heats the roof and doesn't heat us, so it's very cold. And of course, we only have a bit of a vicar, if you like. I mean, the vicar's been wonderful. She's just retired, but she looks after 5 parishes, whereas when I was growing up, you had your own vicar who knew you very well, but that is also a sign of the times that they just it isn't the people or the finance.
Yep. And the families, the old families, are no longer there. When you were here, there were the Webbs and the Goldings and so on.
Yes, and the Harveys.
Yeah.
Yes, they're
disappeared.
I think they've disappeared, and I think they are. I mean, I'm pretty well the last of the Ayreses, and there was a whole host of us. There was. So, I mean, the Ayreses, the Cornwalls, the Harveys, the Webbs, and the Hatleys, they all, I guess, over the because they didn't go anywhere, did they?
No.
You know, they stayed in the little alcove. Yeah.
So I'm looking forward for the next 10 years of your being our neighbour.
Okay.
Richard.
That'll be good.
Thank you very much indeed.
I shall be more crotchety